Speaker. Well, Deputy Speaker, the minister paints a rosy picture, but I don't buy it, and I don't think many Australians would buy it. Because when I go about my work in my community, and I travel around Tasmania, including in regional, rural and remote Tasmania, and when I talk to my wife and her colleagues, my wife is a general practitioner, it is patently obvious that general practice in this country is in crisis. I mean, it is an undeniable fact that many Australians simply can't find a GP with open books, or at least one that might bulk bill. It's an undeniable fact that hospital emergency departments are heavily populated with non-emergency patients. It's an undeniable fact that many Australians are financially stretched right now to breaking point, and the big and growing gap fees is just one more pressure on those family budgets. Tasmania, Deputy Speaker, is particularly badly affected, as reflected in the shocking statistic that regional Tasmania has approximately 1/3 less general practitioners per 1,000 people in the population than the national average. General practice is in crisis. Now, to be fair to the minister, Deputy Speaker, to be fair to the government, there have been some positive reforms. Yes, the urgent care clinics are of some value, in particular in the cities where they tend to be located. And yes, I do acknowledge, Deputy Speaker, that the tripling of the bulk billing incentive payment has led to an uptick in the rate of bulk billing. But again, it is undeniable that bulk billing rates are still woeful right across the country, and GP numbers are still grossly inadequate. Now, the government would dispute that. In fact, the minister, as I say, has just painted a very rosy picture. But even by the government's own numbers, the bulk billing rate is still just 72% in Tasmania. And that apparently reasonable rate, although it's still, I think, very low for a country as rich as ours, it's actually covering up the reality, because when the government measures bulk billing, it uses the number of bulk billed services delivered, not the number of unique patients serviced. So, in other words, if a member of the public goes to see their GP, it has to pay for the consult, but gets a referral for a bulk-billed blood test and perhaps a bulk-billed X-ray, then the numbers the government used would show that as 3 services, 1 not bulk-billed and 2 bulk-billed. In other words, Deputy Speaker, the government's figures are grossly misleading. And in fact, when I drill down into the figures and I look at the figures for Tasmania, for the patients that are always bulk-billed across the state, it's only 36%. Now, that 36%, Deputy Speaker, that figure is before the introduction of the tripling of the bulk billing incentive. But even if you apply all of the uptick that is seen across the country as a result of the bulk billing incentive payment, then the figure for Tasmania for patients who are always bulk billed is still only a bit over 40%. It's barely a bit over half of what the government claims in its figures. Deputy Speaker, this can be fixed. It can be fixed, starting with restoring the Medicare GP rebate to the value it was in 1984 when it was introduced. Because the fact of the matter is that due to pauses in the indexation and inadequate indexation since 1984, the real value of the Medicare GP rebate is about half what it was in 1984. This explains why doctors aren't bulk billing. This explains why the number of unique patients in Tasmania that are always bulk billed is just a bit over 40%. It's because the rebate is so woeful you can't run a GP practice and rely on it. And that's why so many GPs are having to resort to a gap payment. Can we afford this? Of course we can, Deputy Speaker. The budget that was brought down 2 weeks ago forecast that the government will spend $750 billion next financial year. Heavens, it's all about priorities, working out what are the ways we should be spending our money. And very, very quickly, Deputy Speaker, I would add the other problem is the number of graduates. It's such an undesirable line of work now. Only about 10.5% of medical undergraduates are considering following a career in general practice. Heavens, it used to be 70 or 80%. So we have a crisis coming with the number of GPs. Not enough now, certainly not enough in the future. Deputy Speaker, this can be fixed. I call on the government to fix it. I call on the government to have a better set of priorities and invest more money in general practice.